This is Off-Road Independence, episode 31. This podcast is brought to you by beginnersfab.com, the site that teaches you how to make useful, interesting, and creative things with basic tools. Think you don't have the fabrication tools necessary to make what you need? Think again. beginnersfab.com. Off-Road Independence is the proud sponsor of Oregon Trail Off-Road. Stewards of the Trail, ambassadors of adventure. Don't know who they are? Stop by and check them out at OregonTrailOffroad.com. Not only that, but you'll be able to see their first 3 episodes of their web series, One Lane Road, and check them out as they continue to progress and organize themselves for their ultimate adventure. Not only that, but you'll be able to see on their site how you can help them out, and if nothing else, you'll just be able to hang out and enjoy the ride. This is Off-Road Independence, the podcast that talks about trail repair, vehicle modification, and gear selection, helping you become more independent in your off-road adventures. Hey everybody, welcome back to Off-Road Independence. I'm with John Cappa again. This time you actually get to see him live and in person with his wonderful hair there. You get to see a little bit of John Cappa's house as well. Not too much of it, but there it is.
Stovepipe.
You know, that wonderfully professional and hugely popular John Cappa, who's rich, and can't you tell from the interior?
Not quite. Yeah, I think these are asbestos up here.
Well, I can't complain. I mean, look behind me. Doesn't my background just like say off-roading and manly stuff, right? I mean,
I don't know. I see some figurines and stuff.
That's what I'm saying, man.
You live with your grandma?
So that everybody knows, I'm in my in-laws' house. I am shooting this from there, so that's why it looks a little bit different in the background. But I made up for it, man. I'm running a pump. I am rockabilly today, so I'm compensating for my background.
All right.
Yeah, that's how it works. So everybody, just so you know what's going on, today is actually going to be a little bit shorter of an episode. Me and John are going to talk about tires a little bit. We're not going to get super deep into the subject, but we're going to talk about some of the general basics of them, right? Like what makes one, what they're made of, how they're made, those kind of things, and a little bit about the different styles. I mean, that's the idea that we had on mine. We're not going to get into like brands and what one brand and style is better for than another, because shoot, man, we could talk for days on that and still somebody complain about, you're wrong, that tire doesn't work. So that's up for you guys to debate. Me and John are just going to talk a little bit of the tech side of it, but not too deep, so that you guys understand what's going on. So one of the big questions that I had, right, and I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around all this, and that I hear other people talk about, is really what is the difference in tires? Because me and John were talking one day, I bought some Cooper ST Max, which are an all-terrain tire. I bought them in 265, 75, 16, which is like 31 and a half, I think, or almost 32 size, something like that. And John's like, oh man, you bought some Radials. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I did. What's your point? So he got me thinking on what the difference of them is. So John, real quick, what is it that tires really kind of are? You have the Radials, of course, like we mentioned. And then
right, there's nothing wrong with Radials at all. Don't get me wrong at all. I mean, if you're driving on the street for extended periods of time, or then you need a radial tire, because trying to run a bias ply tire, which is the other common type tire, which today isn't all that common anymore. But if you're doing specifically off-road and it's really abusive off-road where you're cutting normal tires, where you're cutting radial tires in the sidewall and stuff, then you probably need to go into a bias ply tire. It's a more heavy-duty tire. It's an older type design. You can find it on heavy equipment and that kind of stuff. But for more fuel efficiency, you're going to want to go with a radial tire. It's going to roll smoother, roll flatter. They're not going to be square in the morning, whereas a bias ply tire on cold mornings, you'll get flat spots. They're more difficult to balance. So if you drive it on the street at all, you're probably going to want to go with a radial tire.
Yeah, because I mean, I've heard like the bias ply, first off, they, depending on the rig you're running too, the bias ply kind of gets stronger on the sidewalls as they get bigger, right?
No,
So
not. It's just the way the plies are wrapped on a radial
okay,
tire. They're uh, uh, they're 90. Let's see, they're 90 degrees to the tread is what
okay,
you'd call it, but it doesn't wrap all the way down to the sidewall. So on the sidewalls, you may only have two or three. In some rare cases, you'll have four plies on the sidewall on a radial, usually only on the race tires, but typically two or three sidewall plies. Whereas on a bias ply tire, the plies are typically 45 degrees to the tread, and they wrap completely around the sidewall. So you end up with just a thicker sidewall on a bias ply tire. But it makes it less compliant, so you have to let more air out of the tire, and sometimes you'll need bead locks to keep the bead on the tire and still make traction.
okay. Because what I was thinking was like, and I know these aren't real common, but I'm just thinking in the worldwide scheme of off-roading, right? Like a Samurai, which is very popular in other countries, not so much the States. They're really light vehicles, right? I mean,
Right.
super, super light. So I was thinking like a 33-inch tire, which is without major modifications, is a pretty close to the max you're going to get on a Samurai or some small rig like that, Daihatsu, Ferosa, or Sport Track or something. Um,
Okay.
that sidewall on a bias ply would probably be pretty stiff to where it wouldn't really
Right.
comply that well, right? Unless you get bead locks and run like 5 pounds,
Yeah,
probably.
you probably would run nowhere near on a small vehicle like that. You would run nowhere near the max psi on the sidewall of that tire just because the vehicle's so lightweight.
Okay. Now, I mean, do from what your experience is, do radials get flat, or can they really get flat spots in them from sitting over a couple of days? It's usually when they sit for a long time, right, that they get that kind of stuff.
Certain brands might flat spot easier than others, but it's pretty rare on a radial tire unless you're dealing with some of the radial race tires that are really heavy duty sidewalls and things like that. But flat spotting on a radial is relatively rare.
Okay. And that's what my experience has been as well. And guys, remember, I host the show and I'm happy to share what I've learned, but I don't think I'm the expert in this kind of stuff. So I like to talk with other guys who have more experience in that kind of stuff.
Guys
Now,
like me that can pretend.
well, now, so like common tires that are used today for like desert racing or rock crawling, that kind of stuff, they're typically radial then too, or are they still going on the bias ply?
I mean, you're looking at almost exclusively at radial tires. There's a few companies that sell bias ply tires.
Hmm.
We won't get into brands or anything like
No.
that. But there are a few brands that still offer like a race type tire that is a bias ply tire. But a radial is by far more common.
Okay. I mean, and so you really have to kind of go looking for the bias ply tires these days
Right.
to not.
There's a few, let's call them boutique tire companies that offer a bias ply tire, and that's they're specifically designed to work well off road, whether it be
Yeah.
for mud or abusive rock and that kind of stuff. If you're looking for the ultimate in tire sidewall strength and tread strength and big lugging knobs on the tread, then yeah, you're going to go search those companies out. But if you're driving it on the street and all that, you're probably not going to want to go with those tires because you're going to see really limited mileage. You're going to see decreased fuel economy, and they're overall they're just heavy, and so they're going to sap a lot of power and sap a lot of braking performance out of your vehicle as well.
Now, I will say this. I do know that some of the radial companies, and well, first off, I want to put a note in this show, okay? I want to put a note. When John was asking me about my tires, it wasn't a hit on Cooper tires, and my tires are great. We're not talking about brands. It's just what brought up the topic when we started talking about, he was just jabbing at me, right? So, I mean, I've used Cooper, I've used Maxxis, I've used a bunch of different companies over the years, Goodyear, all kinds of stuff. And each company has their strengths and their weaknesses, so you'll have to investigate that. There are a bunch of websites that do those kind of articles that talk about that stuff, and they are more suited to that because they do specific tests and that kind of stuff. So in fact, I'll look up some articles and put them in the show notes of this for you guys to kind of look at to get your idea. But like one thing I do know is some of the tires that I've bought, right? Like they say sidewall armor, which is a little bit thicker of an armor or a sidewall, or Maybe sometimes, depending on the company, from what I've read, they use a tighter weave pattern
Right.
as one layer on top of the standard cap to kind of give it a sidewall protection and it doesn't cut. And I've experienced where I live in Chile, all the volcanic rock, which, it kind of comes out jagged and pointed. The non-sidewall protected of some companies does well, and some of it without sidewall protection doesn't do good at all. It's very thin and it cuts real easy. So
Right.
just because it says sidewall armor or not doesn't really mean it's really that much stronger than all the other tires out there. Don't go by that. You kind of have to do some investigation and just view what people's experiences are online is what I've found to kind of
Right.
figure
Not
that out.
only that, is you can actually look at the design of the tire. It says
Mhm.
right on the sidewall. You can see how many plies are in the tread, how many plies are in the sidewall, and what they're made out of. It says right on the sidewall of the tire. So generally, if you're looking for something that you want to use off road, and you have things like sticks or sharp rocks in your area, then you probably should try and steer into a 3-ply sidewall. Most radials are 2-ply sidewalls, and again, with price, you're going to find that the 2-ply sidewalls are generally a lot cheaper. They're less expensive than the 3 and sometimes the 4 sidewalls.
And the good thing about the radials, from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but what I've seen is that a number of the radial companies offer, like you're saying, the 2, 3, or 4-ply, right? And it doesn't.
4-ply is pretty rare, but yeah.
But it doesn't depend so much on the size of the tire, but granted, it does have a relation to that to some degree, but just because you buy a larger diameter tire doesn't specifically mean you're going to get a thicker sidewall.
Correct.
You have to find that tire in their selection option that is the diameter you want plus the thicker sidewalls, right?
Yeah, usually when you start stepping into the light truck tires, which will end in let's say you're going with a metric size instead of a flotation size. At the end of the metric size, you'll see an LT, like a capital L and a capital T, instead of a P, which the P stands for passenger car. The LT stands for light truck.
Now, you bring that up, and that's a good point. I've seen some all-terrain tires. Well, I guess we should specify here. Let's get into a little bit of a side segment on tires, but not too deep. All-terrain is very wide these days, right?
Right, and there's even like an in-betweener tire now too that kind of fits between an all-terrain and a mud terrain, right?
And some of them call them all-terrain, and they're almost more mud terrain, and some of them call them mud terrain, and they're almost more all-terrain. And then they call all-terrains that are basically 90% street tires, but have just a little bit of shoulder opening to clean out a little bit of mud, and they call them all-terrains. So don't be fooled just by the name. If you're just getting into all this stuff, you can't just go into a shop and say, I want an all-terrain tire, and they'll be like, okay, here's your tire, and you'll be like, this is going to work for everything. You can't do it.
You need to look for specific tread designs for what you plan on hitting. I mean, if you plan on hitting ice and snow, then you need to look for a specific tread design that fits those needs. If you hit really nasty clay type mud, you need to look for a tread design that will work for that as well.
Yeah, and that's why, just so you guys understand, on the forums, you'll see people say, I bought these all-terrain tires and they're horrible for, and they'll name some kind of situation that they've been driving in, right? But then you'll find other people say, no, I bought some all-terrain tires and they just hook up in mud like nobody's business.
And again, you have no idea how these people are using them or what air pressure they're running them at or how heavy their vehicle is. And sometimes you don't even know what size the tire is. So there's a lot of variables that can alter how that tire will function in a given situation.
Yeah, and that's a very good point because, like, for instance, I watched some videos on maintenance of tires and that kind of stuff online, and I'm talking companies that produce tires, right? And they're like, well, you should keep your tire at the minimal air pressure suggested on the tire, which is great because they say if you run your tires too low on the road, it heats them up, right? If you don't have enough air pressure, even though it's a softer ride, it heats them up, and then it can create a breakdown in the sidewalls, and it can make them dangerous, which I support that 100%. However, if the tire was designed for, I don't know, like a mid-size or full-size pickup, right, and you're using them on a very small, light vehicle, and you're running at 45 PSI or 35 PSI, it's like a lot of pressure in those tires for such a small vehicle.
Right. There's
So
very few situations where you're going to run the max sidewall pressure in that tire on your vehicle. It's very
yeah,
rare because typically most tire, I mean, when you get into like the light truck tires, you're getting into the C, D, and even E load rating on those tires. And so, you put an E load rating tire on a small Samurai type vehicle, and you're not going to need the whatever 65 or 70 PSI that tire requires.
yeah. I mean, it just gets a lot. And even me with the tires I have on my Trooper right now, it's a full size. What would that be considered? It's an SUV, but what would a Trooper be?
Mid-size or
Mid-size SUV,
as
maybe.
SUV probably.
And I tried running full air pressure in them, like it was
Oh yeah.
suggested, and it's like it beats you to death.
Right.
So I had to drop them down. I think full pressure was that they said not max, like for weight, but standard driving. I think they said was 45, and I couldn't do it. It was something like that, 40. I think it was 40, and I dropped them down to around 30, and they run without too much of a bulge in the side, and they give a little bit, but not too much to get heated up. So
Right.
it's
A good way to figure that out is if you can find a good flat asphalt or concrete section, and run some chalk across the tread, right? Like just some child's play chalk, the stuff that they draw on sidewalks with. Run that across the tread on all four tires. Drive it forward 20 to 40, maybe even 50 feet. Don't turn or anything. Just go forward and then see where that chalk is wearing on the tires. If you have too much air, it's going to wear in the middle of the tread. If you have too little air, it'll wear on the outside edges. So, you kind of alter the air pressure to figure out, where you need it. I mean, if you're using stock size tires and the stock design of the tire, which on most SUVs is going to be like a passenger car size tire, it'll be a P, then you can use the door sticker. The door sticker tells you what PSI to run, but that's not going to help you if you have a lifted application or aftermarket tires on your truck.
Yeah, especially if you're running larger tires and that kind of stuff, because then you have to start figuring out what works for the air pressure required to keep them on your rims. Of course, that depends on if you're running bead locks or not, or if you're running a two-piece wheel that has those internal bead lock systems that are kind of funky or not. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. So me and John are not trying to tell you this is what the solution is. You kind of have to do your investigation yourself.
Right.
But don't be sold by what a tire salesman or what is said on the internet either, because, I mean, I've bought some, like I had some Maxxis buckshots, and this isn't talking about how great they are or anything. It was just a personal application of mine. And I found that they actually, while being mud tires in their rating, right, their MTs, got to where I got good results in the size vehicle I was running on gravel. And actually, they ran better on that vehicle in gravel than some of the all-terrain tires that I've owned that were made for gravel, but in a bigger vehicle, and they didn't grip up as well. Now, one thing you have to remember too is that like the mud tires, because of the bigger shoulders, gravel gets caught in them and it slings it all over the bottom of your vehicle. Every few minutes you're hearing clack, 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 clack from all the gravel. But that's just, part of it. So there's no perfect tire out there from what I've found. You're always going to have pros and cons. It's just what pros outweigh the cons for your tire.
What compromises can you make? I mean, you may find that, you drive in the snow quite often, and so you need a bunch of sipes in the tire and all that, and you need a more of an all-terrain type tire. But then come springtime or fall or whatever, then you're running in mud, and so you kind of got to make some compromises. What's more important to you? Which one do I do the most? And then you got to steer into a tire that fits that. Or unless money's no object, then go ahead and buy 2 or 3 different sets of tires that you can change throughout the year.
Yeah, and that's what some people do. They just find a cheap set of steel wheels or whatever, or a cheap set of aluminum wheels, and they buy a specific off-road tire. They leave those stored. They buy some street tires or whatnot, put them on their factory rims, and then they run those daily. And then they just change them out for the trail. And then all you have to deal with is the unbalance and the road noise or the wear to the trailhead. You don't have to really worry about daily wear on them. Because one thing to keep in mind is everybody talks about like mud tires and how noisy they are. And it's true. It's true. Some are worse than others, but it's true.
The modern tread designs on a lot of these tires aren't that bad, especially when you get into the more expensive tires. If you buy a less expensive tire, then sometimes they don't have the design features that help eliminate that noise, which is like alternating block sizes and just the shape of the blocks and things like that. There's a lot of things that tire companies can do to alleviate some of that noise to make them a little quieter.
Yeah, like for instance, the block sizes like John's talking about, if you see like on a mud tire, the blocks have typically larger separations, greater voids in between each block to get rid of the mud. That's the idea. If you see that the edge of the block is more rounded or slightly beveled, that typically helps in gas mileage and cut down noise. But when they're really sharp,
depend on the rubber, the type of rubber they're using.
Yeah.
And everything. There's so many elements that come into play as far as a tire being noisy or how well it ejects mud and that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about somebody I know in Chile. In Chile, the Chinese tires, that are actually a Chinese name and whatnot, are big there. They're pretty popular to be imported. They are a relatively good quality for the price you pay, right? And a lot of them are just copies of, like, I don't know. Honestly, I know some of them are like the what are they called? But they're just copies of famous off-road tires, right? And my friend found a set almost brand new for cheap. I mean, I think they were 32-inch, and they were mud tires, and they were like, I think the set of 4 was $280.
Oh, wow.
They were used, but pretty good shape, right? Well, they felt really comfortable on the road. But within a year, they were bald because the tire compound was so soft. It gripped really well. It just didn't have any duration to it.
Right. I think you'll see that with some of the less expensive tires. Either the compound won't last very long or it lasts a long time, but it doesn't grip very well. I don't know. I've never been a fan of really cheap, inexpensive tires. I mean, this is the last part where your vehicle makes contact with the ground. This is the last place where you're getting power to the ground. This is where you need to make the difference. I'm just never been a fan of cheap wheels and tires.
Yeah. Well, I will say one more thing. While his vehicle drove well on the road, we did notice that in power stop situations where you're like braking hard to miss a dog or whatever it is on the road, you could feel the truck rolling over the tire, if that makes sense. Like
you'd have tire squirms.
Yeah, the tire squirm was bad. It would like kind of move the tire, and it's because the rubber they used isn't a hard compound. It doesn't. Maybe even the structure of mesh inside, it just didn't give that stability to the tire.
That's why the tires are inexpensive.
Yeah.
They're not well designed.
So just keep that in mind too, because I've seen some of those companies being shipped to the States and sold. And I know in like Australia they sell some of those. Some of the companies that they sell in Chile are for sale in Australia as well. So yes, they're cheap. Yes, they're relatively good, relatively speaking. But they aren't great. You know what I mean? So just kind of, your life, I guarantee you, your life is worth more than $300. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah. I think what it comes down to is nobody ever wants to admit that they bought a poor product. So you might go onto forums or wherever else, and everyone will talk up, oh, these are the best tires ever, because nobody wants to admit that, oh, I bought these tires and they're not that great.
I hate them.
Because it's not like you can take them back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So take everyone's opinion with a grain of salt, unless you really trust the person and you know exactly how they're using their tires and things. Just, you got to look out there and see what works in your area. If, you see somebody using a particular tire and they seem to do really well with it, you could ask them, hey, what do you think of it? What air pressures do you run at, especially if it's a similar vehicle to your own?
Yeah, look for forums. I go back to my episode, I think it was 17 with Carrie Sharon or something, where we talked about forums and cautions of forums and listening to people.
That's a whole nother segment.
And I did that with Carrie Sharon. And it's like, so first off, look for forums that are for your vehicle, right? Not just the brand, but the specific model. And then look for forums for daily driving on the road, and then look for forums for off-road. so that you have both aspects in mind of it.
Yeah, I'd prefer to talk to an individual because then you can see how the guy's using it. You never know who's on the forum because the guy could be an 800-pound gorilla behind a keyboard, and you have no idea if he actually has any off-road experience. I'd rather talk to a guy in person that's on the trails in the area that you're at, because let's say you find some guy on a forum that's has the same vehicle as you, and he's using the tires and he says they're garbage, but I don't know, he lives in the Southwest and you live in the Northeast. It's kind of, what are you going to do?
Kind of different there as to what you're, and even that's a big deal. Don't forget compounds of where you're driving. Like somebody says, oh, sand, they work horrible in sand. Well, what kind of sand?
Sure. Is it a sand dune? Is it gravel? Is it,
beach sand? Is it,
and maybe the guy didn't air down.
Fine.
There's so many variables. Things. Yeah, there's so many variables.
And for that same reason, big thing to keep in mind is make sure you're running appropriate air pressures off-road and appropriate air pressures on-road. That's a big deal.
The number one mistake I see people make is they run too much air pressure in their tires off-road. You can go to even Moab or wherever else, and you'll ask some guy, "Well, what kind of pressure are you running?" "Oh, I got 20 psi," and the guy's got bead locks or something on there, and you're like, "What are you doing?" You've got the 3,000-pound vehicle with these D load range tires at 20 psi with a bead lock. That's like street pressure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's like burning up the tires trying to get out of one of the.
These tires stink. And
they're not grabbing at all. It's like
you got 20 psi in them.
We're not on the highway, bro.
Yeah. So that's the biggest mistake I see people make is running too much air pressure off road.
Yeah, and so for the same, I suggest heavily that you guys make sure you get some kind of compressor, right? I mean, whether it be just a cheapo, plug it in your cigarette lighter and run it. Which,
I'm not a fan because you're going to take forever and your buddies are going to hate you.
Okay, but I'm just saying it's better that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying it's better that than running street pressure off-road.
You're going to recommend they go buy a hand pump to pump up their tires. Really, Eric? Come on.
Hey, if it works.
Laugh as you. I've actually reseated a bead with a hand pump before. That was fun.
Okay, we got a few minutes. Tell me the story. How'd you do it?
It's not really that much of a story. I was with my friend in the dunes. Of course, I didn't have a spare tire, and we were at the dunes in Glamis, and we were cruising along, and wheeling, kind of going sideways and everything. I was probably down to 4 psi with no bead locks, and we kind of hit this side hill. We ended up rolling over, I think one or two times, and one of the beads popped. And
what were you in? What were you driving?
What's that?
What were you driving?
An old flat fender Jeep.
Okay.
It had 35-inch tires on it.
And you guys didn't kill yourselves? Oh, it must have had a cage.
Yeah, it had a cage, but the cage, of course, sank into the sand, and we hit our heads and everything. But we were fine. We walked away. So, we got the Jeep back on the wheels and everything, and all I had was this bicycle pump in the back of my Jeep. This is like, I don't know, I think it was 19 or 20 years old or something like that, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. But it was a high-volume bicycle pump, and it wasn't high pressure.
Oh, watch out. It was high volume.
Yeah, watch out. Because the tube, the pump tube was, I don't know, must have been about 2.5 inches in diameter. So it really moved a lot of air for each pump. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. So I ended up running a ratchet strap around the bead, and I tightened it up real good so the tire was hitting the bead of the rim, and then I put a little bit of water in there so it would help seal it, and cleaned out all the dirt and everything, and just started pumping, and it eventually popped and got on there. It worked.
You didn't have to use any ethyl or
no, I don't like doing that. That's that can be dangerous. You can blow up your tires.
Well, I think I told you here in Chile. No, I'm not in Chile. Clearly in this episode, but where I live in Chile.
House.
Yeah, they pour gasoline.
Oh God. Yeah, don't do that.
And then they light it.
Don't do that. Yeah, if you want to see why you shouldn't do that, go ahead and Google using ether or gasoline to reseat your tires. You'll see guys, destroy their, $500 tires or whatever. It's just not a good idea.
Or rims. Like I put one up. It went around for a little while. I put one up on Off-Road Independence Facebook page, and the guy had 40-inch tires or something and he stuck a stick that had fire on the end of it after they had sprayed, and the tire exploded, and the inside of the wheel actually came apart from the body of the wheel, It's like no joke.
There's people that swear by it, and there's people that are really good at it and everything, and that's fine and dandy. But if you've never done it before and you don't know what you're doing, I don't recommend it.
Yeah, well, now these days they're not cheap. They're like $400, but you can get those high volume air systems to carry in. Yeah, a bead setter set.
Yeah, a bead cheetah. We used to have one at the tire store I worked at. It's basically looks like a 5-gallon tank with a 2.5-inch tube on it with a kind of a flared out fitting at the end that would just launches 100 psi of air right at the bead, like really quickly. You pull a lever and it's like an explosion of air that fills up the tire.
So that's a better and much safer option if you're cheap.
You can't really carry it around with you on the trail there.
But what are these systems? We're kind of getting off on a small tangent, but nothing big. I see these systems. A lot of guys are strapping to their roll cages in some of the Jeeps, and also some of the FJ guys I've seen. The FJ Cruisers are using them, and it's some kind of compressed air system.
Oh, like a CO2 tank.
Is it a CO2 tank? Is that what? I haven't investigated it yet.
Yeah.
Do they put enough volume?
A ton of volume. You can run air tools off of them. The only bummer with them is once they go empty, it's empty. You can't refill it. You got to go find a welding shop or whatever to get it refilled. You can't refill it on the trail.
Okay.
So depending on where you're going or how long you're going to be gone, it may work for you or it may not work for you depending on kind of space you have as well.
Do you know if any of the onboard air systems are moving enough volume at this moment to reset beads?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I haven't.
Like I said, if I can do it with a hand pump, you can do it with almost any air compressor. So
I've got to get up to date on.
I've reseated beads, like I said, with everything from a hand pump to a what do you call it? A CO2 tank, and then onboard compressors. I'd like to find an onboard compressor that at least makes, I don't know, up to 2 CFM at 90 psi is probably a good compressor. It's going to not be a cheap compressor, but that's enough to seat a bead. And you could, in some cases, if you have a tank, you could even run air tools off of it.
And once again, I'm in complete agreement with John on a lot of this stuff. However, I also understand that there are people who just don't have that kind of money to invest. They just want to have a good time with the vehicles they have. So I encourage have some kind of air moving system for your tires. Make sure you run the right because the worst thing out there is to get out there and not run lower air pressure and get stuck in every mud hole you go through. Get stuck every time you hit the sand. Be bouncing all over the place on rocks because you're not getting. So, I mean, if it's a $20 cigarette lighter, that's better than nothing. But I highly suggest, like John's talking about, even a cigarette. I've seen a few cigarette lighter ones that are higher. They have like a bigger piston and they're higher volume, so they're faster. Right. They're not cheap either, but it's cheaper than an onboard air system. So just look at your options, what you can afford, but have something. That's what I say.
The half decent ones started around $100.
Yeah, and a good decent, a decent good one, I guess I would say, is around 200, 150. Yeah, and then good ones are going to be over 300, typically 250, 300, something like that.
There's a ton of different options. There's portable ones that come into little toolboxes where everything fits inside the toolbox. Those are really cool and convenient because you can store them away. Others you could mount, hard mount inside your vehicle, and then you could add a tank if you have the space somewhere in your vehicle, and you could run hose chucks, at each corner if you wanted to.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's our show for today with John. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I had to call up John and tell him to fix his hair and get ready for the show, and he was like, "Okay." So I appreciate it, John. I always do. You're a big help with all this. So thanks.
No problem.
And we'll have you on the show again, I'm sure, in the future. So everybody, thanks for stopping by today. Once again, we always encourage you guys. Me and John have talked about this personally a lot. What we like to see is people being safe out on the trail. That's the idea. Have fun, but be safe. So do that. And don't forget to stop by all my stuff that I have for the show. Please stop by offroadindependence.com. I also have the beginnersfab.com stuff going on. Don't forget to stop by my YouTube stuff if you would. Check out my videos. What?
Buy your small figurine set. And
yeah, I've got porcelain ballet dancers that I'm selling now, right? Don't forget, speaking of selling stuff, don't forget to stop by Zazzle and pick up a t-shirt and a sticker. Hey, I know this looks like I'm having fun, and honestly I am having fun, but it's work. Ask John, anything in media, it's work, right?
Oh, boo-hoo, everyone's crying for you.
Hey, I do appreciate it, but it is work. So any support that you guys give me helps me keep this going, and we'll just keep working on it from here on out. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next show.
All right.
Please feel free to like, comment, and share on all of my videos. You can also please subscribe to my video channel on YouTube. One more thing is that I have t-shirts, stickers, and other swag available through Zazzle. They're good quality products. Go straight to zazzle.com/offroad_independence and check out my store there. So all of that really helps me keep these shows going. This is all out of pocket, and any help that you guys were willing to give and any promotion that you're willing to take on by wearing my swag or putting a sticker on your vehicle is very much appreciated. If you buy a shirt, if you put a sticker on your vehicle, please send me photos of them. I'll put them up on the page. Thanks, guys. Till next time, hope you guys have fun. And as always, please be safe in all that you do, whether it be willing or fabricated. So until next time, have a good time, and I'll talk to you later.